good evening, and welcome to Couch Conversations with the Doctors where health. What's tonight? Tonight is dinner. It is time for Couch Conversations with the Doctor. As always, we're going to go around our esteemed panel and introduce our great panelists who are here with us tonight. I'm getting a little feedback on someone's end, so I'm going to ask if we are not speaking, if we can mute to make sure that we get rid of some of this feedback until we can figure out what it is. I'm going to go right into our very first panelist who is here with us, who's a renowned urologist and hates accolades, but he's the urologist of the stars. That's our very own Dr. Terry Mason. Dr. Mason.
Good evening, Nikki and Congressman Davis and my esteemed colleagues. It's once again a pleasure to be sharing this time with everyone, and we hope to continue to share things to help our listeners and watchers guide themselves better through whatever it is in life that their challenges are. So I'm grateful to be here.
Outstanding, and thank you so very much. I want to say hey to Sister Bonnie, who is here with us on this evening, and also to Yolanda Williams. Yolanda Williams is saying good evening to everyone. To the guy who has the best art there is. He is an art connoisseur. That's our very own Joseph Harrington. Hey, Joe. Joe? So, Joe, we can't hear you.
Yeah.
Let's try it one more time, Joe.
Can you hear me now? Okay.
We do.
Now we can. Go right ahead.
Okay. Well, as Nikki said, I am Joe Harrington, colleague of, I guess, everyone that's in this program, known a number of you for many, many years. My background is mostly in public health, but I also worked in healthcare, worked at 3 different hospitals. Retired in 2017 from the Illinois Department of Public Health, where I was a regional health officer for Cook County and an administrative law judge.
Okay. Well, outstanding. Right to the doctor who is 100, known on these streets as Dr. 100. That's our very own Dr. Well, our very own Dr. Maya Green. Dr. Maya Green, go right ahead.
Hi, Nikki, Congressman. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be amongst my esteemed colleagues once again. Happy to be learning. Excited to get into our topics for tonight.
Outstanding, and thank you so very much to the weight loss guru, the family practice medicine doctor who's really the Wolfgang Puck of food, that is, our very own Dr. Tony Hampton. Dr. Hampton.
Happy to be here, guys. As Nikki has suggested, I focus on obesity medicine, primary care as a family doctor. And of course, we try to integrate our lifestyle practices into the clinic and hoping to make that the standard model. Doctors need more time. They need more knowledge. And with those 2 things, they'll be able to spread this message. So I'm always thrilled to share my voice, and I appreciate you guys for having me here.
Outstanding, and thank you so very much. I want to say hey to Michelle Garrettson that's here with us. She says good evening to everyone. To Keena Brown, who is here with us, she says good evening to Linda Johnson and Audrey J. Cox, who is here with us. They say good evening to everybody. And I see Hattie Lake is here with us. And Hattie Lake says good to be on. So thank you, Hattie, for being here with us just as well. To the man who makes it possible for us to do this each and every Monday night, to the one who really teaches us that true wealth is health. That's our very own Congressman of the Illinois 7th Congressional District, Congressman Danny K. Davis. Congressman?
And I don't think we ever get enough of either one. And even those, when you get a lot, there are enough other people to share whatever it is that you've got with. And so you still can keep using more. You know, I was listening to the Gershwin song the other day, and it said that folks with plenty got a lock on the door. They're trying to keep anybody else from breaking in, taking any, while they got plenty of more. And he went on to say that I've got plenty of nothing, and nothing is plenty for me. Well, I don't think we ever want to be in that position. But I do think that health is everything. And it's so unfortunate that it appears that our world is becoming more and more unstable. I'm reading where there are countries where street gangs have pretty much taken over, and that it's taken the military. These are some places in Central America, and it's taken the military to try and maintain law and order. And of course, we know that the United States of America appear to be on the verge of war because 3 of our soldiers have been killed by another country, a foreign entity. And people are clamoring for some reaction to that. And there are different kinds of people who think that reaction can be in many ways. And so I thought it would just be good to think about those things and how the instability of nations causes all of us to have health issues and health concerns. And I don't know how we escape any of it. And I don't know how history records. I mean, I was listening the other day, and one analyst was suggesting that we once had a Secretary of State in our country that you could lay the death of thousands of people on this floor. That his handling of our policies resulted in the death of just thousands and thousands of people. And I guess one kind of health is as good as the other kind. And any kind that will shorten lives and kill people has to be addressed the same as we address the other kind. So I'm eager to get it on and hear what we've got to say tonight about the various illnesses and how we can prevent some of them from occurring, and what we can do about some of them once they are with us. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and I look forward to tonight's discussion. Thank you.
Outstanding. Well, Dorothy Murphy is here with us, and she says, good evening to everyone. Mimi Boybray is here, and she says, good evening to everyone just as well. Linda Johnson says, my Lord, she appreciated those comments that you shared, Congressman. Connie Taylor is here, and she says, good evening to everyone. And Nellie Purnell is here, and she's saying, good evening to everyone just as well. Well, Dr. Maya Green, why don't you get started on our topic?
Sure. This being close to the end of January, I remember when we first started this January, we talked about a couple of things. We talked about glaucoma, we talked about sickle cell, and we said we would talk about, well, we were supposed to talk about sickle cell, glaucoma, and thyroid disease. And the sickle cell conversation just went so well and is so in depth, and the community was interacting with us and we were interacting with the community, and it was just so interesting that we never got on glaucoma and thyroid. And then Dr. Johnson came last week and helped us with glaucoma. And this being January, which is Thyroid Awareness Month, I didn't want the month to end, Nikki and Congressman, without addressing thyroid disorder, as as the plan was. And I think it's a great plan when we started this month. So I'll just start it off by talking about a brief overview of kind of what I planned to say that night, but didn't get a chance to. And then my colleagues just come in and fix up whatever I say. How's that sound? Okay. Well,
very good. But you gotta address some things about weight loss and weight gain with thyroid, because that's the questions that are coming in right now. So
okay, overview, and then I'll hand it off. I'll give an overview, and then I'll hand it off. My colleagues can come in if you want. All right. So interestingly enough, the thyroid is like a little butterfly shaped. Let's see if this is a butterfly gland, and it's like maybe right here in our neck, right? We know where it is because sometimes we've seen people with a big old bulge right there, and it's usually, if they're not getting enough iodine, it's called a goiter, right? So that's one thing that can happen to the thyroid. You can get a goiter, a swelling of that area, right? The other things, 4 things basically in my mind can happen. Colleagues, correct me if I'm wrong. You can get a goiter, you can get hyperthyroid. The thyroid is, it's running. Then you can get hypothyroid. Thyroid's not producing a lot. Hypo, sleep, snore with the O, right? And then occasionally you get thyroid cancer. Now, 60% of people that have thyroid disorder don't know about it, right? So a way I find out about it is I go to my doctor, and when I get my labs, I ask for something called a TSH, or a thyroid screening exam, right? And then 1 out of 10 people in the US have thyroid disorder. And then when you look at women, 1 out of 8 women are more likely to have thyroid disorder than men, right? I can go more into it. I don't know if one of my colleagues want to take hypo, goiter, or the cancers. I'll wait 3 seconds. Okay. Hyper.
I can. Well,
okay, go ahead.
I'll add something. I don't want to put you on the hot seat too long. But
go ahead.
So I think I want to do hypo because I think a lot of people come to me and they say, Doc, I have a thyroid problem, and they come to me for weight loss. And it is 100% true that hypothyroid problems can absolutely lead to weight gain. But it's also true that most people who have weight issues, it's not because they have a low thyroid. It's very rare that you have somebody come to the office, they're not at their ideal body weight, you put them on thyroid medicine for their low thyroid, and all of a sudden the weight magically goes away. The hormone that is most responsible for weight gain is too much insulin, because insulin is the fat storage hormone. So I just want to put that in the air. And if I don't know what the actual stats, but if I had to blame thyroid on obesity, it'd probably be less than 5%, probably in the 1-3% range. So I just want to say that out loud. Having said that, if a person comes to me and they're, even before I do a TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, and people say, well, if the thyroid stimulating hormone is high, why is that a low thyroid? And that's because if that hormone being stimulated by the pituitary to be released is high, it's high because your thyroid is low and it's trying to stimulate the gland in your neck, the thyroid gland, to actually then make the thyroid hormone. But people come in and they complain of being sluggish or fatigued. Sometimes they don't tolerate cold, so they get cold really easy. We think about, and let me keep it simple. Think about things kind of getting slower, and think about because it's kind of, your thyroid is so important for your metabolism. So you may end up constipated. You may find your muscles being a little weak. You may get brain fog. And you definitely, as I mentioned earlier, can get weight gain. You can also have dry hair, dry skin, and things like that. And when we talk about the other thyroid condition, we will think about the opposite of that is true. Now, and I think in the United States, one of the things that you think about is, well, why do I have this problem in the first place? And it's really mostly an autoimmune disease. And when we say that term, we're talking about something that attacks itself. So when I see patients, one of the things I'm curious about is if they have what we call Hashimoto's thyroiditis. That's an autoimmune disease, and of course, when your body attacks itself, it's not supposed to do that, but it'll do that, and you can get Hashimoto's thyroid disease. So one of the ways to deal with that is to really focus on doing things that strengthen your or reduce your risk for autoimmune diseases. In fact, when I see patients with this Hashimoto's low thyroid condition, I worry about other autoimmune diseases. So I'll do tests for that as well. And but the other reason why people get it, not just autoimmune, you can have deficiencies of iodine, and we're blessed in the United States to have ionized salt, the little Morton girl. And so the main reason why we did that is because, unlike some of the countries that don't have that, we have the opportunity to protect our population by making sure we don't have that deficiency. There's also other reasons why you can get it. At the end of the day, like too much stress can put you at risk for it, and poor gut health and things like that. So those are the things that kind of come to mind. Most of us are treating this with hormone treatment. Most of us have heard of Synthroid, levothyroxine. Those are things that come to mind. It's almost like taking a vitamin. It's not really a medicine in the way we think of it, and they have to do levels to make sure that you get to a level that is in what we call the therapeutic range. One of the things you want to ask your doctor to do is not just focus on a TSH. It's important that we do a free T3, a free T4, and they have these thyroid antibodies. One is TPO, I think. And if you order those antibodies, that'll help distinguish between a thyroid condition that's low from other causes other than autoimmune. And those are the things you want to think about. And other than iodine, from my holistic perspective, you also want to make sure you're getting enough selenium and zinc. Those are two of the supplements that may be helpful as well. You want to reduce your stress, because if you are stressing your body, you're stressing your hormones, and you're more likely to fatigue it to the point where it won't function. So I'll kind of stop there. Maybe we can touch on the other conditions, maybe hyper.
Well, right before we get to that, Dr. Hampton, I have a ton of questions. I have a question that says, really, doctors, how do we relieve stress? Stress is in everything that we do and in our everyday lives. How do we relieve it?
Let me say this real quick. I get this. I mean, listen, I'll say this real quick. It's the main thing is to think holistically. Don't think about one thing, right? So you want to do exercise, but not too much exercise. So I exercise twice a week. people who are spiritual should engage in their spiritual journey and use that devotional time to connect with God and use that as a way to, it's like meditation. Those who are not spiritual, you can still meditate. And so I think that's important. Obviously, I'm interested in a diet. If you are stressing your body with processed food, sugar, and things of that nature, then you're going to not be optimal and it's going to be stressful. You want to get enough sleep. And some people need to, in the communities of color, we absolutely underutilize behavioral health. So we need to be comfortable talking to a therapist. I can say publicly, me and my wife has a relationship coach we talk to every month. And I honestly would argue that without that, I'm not sure we'd be in a relationship. So I think we have to be comfortable. And people say, you're so successful and all that nonsense. Well, there's a reason why, because I know my weak spots. I know when I have a gap. I know when I have blind spots, and I'm comfortable as a man, and women should be comfortable too, to say, hey, I need some help in this area because I have a spot where I need to be better. So those are the things that come to mind that have helped me and my patients do well with stress.
Well, I was only laughing because we got a comment from Beverly, and Beverly says, you must not have a husband. Then she says, oh, you are the husband.
Amen.
Yeah. If I could chime in, and I'm going to ask a question. Yeah. Well, a couple of things. One, I took a quick look at the population of the United States. We're talking about somewhere about 336 million people. And I did the math. So we're talking about probably 36 million people, if we're talking about 10% of the population, that has some form of thyroid condition in this country. So in some respects, it might seem like a small number of people have it because it's not the entire population, but 36 million is a lot of people. And so that means that there are a variety of conditions that this can cause. And some people are suffering from one as opposed to another. And some of what we said may go over their head. But the thyroid gland actually produces hormones that regulate our metabolic rate, our growth, and our development. So they can have a significant impact upon our quality of life moving forward. And one of the things that we talked about earlier, and I think Congressman Davis alluded to this, we live in a very complex, high-tech, fast-moving, ever-changing, more violent than ever world. And people need to understand they need to find a time and a place where they can step back. And I guess Dr. Tony mentioned, step back away from this and take stock of what's going on in their lives and try to get some perspective moving forward. So I think that, and that's one form of meditation, just to step back, remove yourself from all these things, think about what's happening, where you want to be, where you want to do, what you want to do, and how you want to move forward. So you can steady yourself so you can deal with the conditions that you have. The question that I get to, because a lot of times when you're talking to people in general, they want to know what are the symptoms. We talk about different types of problems with the thyroid. What should people be looking for? Because the unfortunate thing, and I've said this before, and one of Dr. Mason's colleagues talked about this, and Dr. Mason said this, most people operate out of a symptom-based paradigm. Yeah. So they feel that if there's no symptom, then everything must be all right. So are there some symptoms that people should be looking for? Because we have a lot of lay people here that they should be looking for. And that means that if you have one of those, that you're probably a state where you have some kind of thyroid disease, and you could be in an advanced state and not know it. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Mr. Harrington. I don't know if I know, Dr. Graham, you may deal with a lot of people with thyroid stuff. I don't know, I don't know if you want to answer, but I could quickly just go over some stuff after you if you want.
Well, I really like what Dr. Tony did. I mean, I really thought it was very, very thorough and very, very careful. I just want to comment that autoimmune thyroid disease is 100 times more common than lupus. And so oftentimes people get a positive test for lupus and that's all they think about. And my first thought is that common things occur commonly. And so it's worthwhile being looked at because early detection is really, really valuable. It's much easier to treat somebody at the early stages and they'll be more comfortable quicker than treating them at the late stages. The other thing to talk about is that autoimmune thyroid disease is often associated with autoimmune eye disease. And for some strange reason, the eye muscles can be affected. So if you start to see your eyes look a little bit different and they seem like they're coming a little bit further out of where they're normally looking at, that would be one of the things that you would ask your doctor to test you for.
Dr. Maya, everybody knows I'm a urologist, so the thyroid is a long way away from the organs that I deal with. So I have dealt
not with libido, not with libido.
Well, libido on one side, but I think
Mm-hmm.
if we've talked enough, somewhat about hypothyroidism and low thyroid problems, but having had a family member who had hyperthyroidism, and to see what she had to go through in terms of hair loss and nervousness and jitteriness and weight loss. I mean, just a number of things. If you guys could sort of talk about that for
Sure.
folks, that'd be helpful.
Sure. The way I think about it, I was trying to give a brief overview at the beginning of the kind of situation and then bring it in. The way I think about it, there's again this butterfly gland, and it essentially takes certain nutrients and converts it into things we use for energy processing, things like that, right? And that's what it does. And it, like they say, it plays so many factors. So here it is, and it's almost like when you go to the restaurant. Very rarely do you meet the cook. Very rarely do you meet the person putting food on the plate, right? You go to the restaurant, you tell someone else, here's what I want. That person tells the other person. The person makes it, brings it back to you, and then you say, this is good, this is enough. This is, if I'm talking about how cooked something is, this is underdone, this is overdone. If it's underdone, what do? I send it back. I activate, right? If it's overdone, I say, whoa, slow down. And that's what the thyroid does, right? So the thyroid kind of functions. There's the pituitary gland that goes and it sends a message down, and the thyroid starts to produce these hormones. If the thyroid looks and we need to step on the gas, we need more of those hormones, T4, T3, those are the short names for it. It says, hey, step on the gas. That gas is called thyroid stimulating hormone. It stimulates the thyroid to create more of it, right? If it has too much, it pulls back. So what happens if things are moving slow? First of all, let's talk about things are moving slow. Hypothyroid, right? Slow. Oh, hypo is for the slow. Okay. The unexplained weight gain Dr. Hampton talked about. I'm sluggish. I'm gaining weight. I'm fatigued. I'm hypersensitive to cold. Constipation. Dr. Hampton already mentioned that. My skin is dry. Sometimes I get this hoarseness, and then things start puffing up. I'm gaining weight, but for other reasons, it's puffing up in the face. I'm achy all the time, right? And then it's actually associated with high blood cholesterol, can be associated with moving into metabolic syndrome and diabetes. And then the thinning of the hair. So things are moving slow. They're not growing. Hair's not growing. I'm cold. My heart rate is slow. I feel down and sluggish and fatigued, hypo. And then I'm forgetting stuff. Things are just cloudy and sometimes gloomy. And it can affect, Dr. Mason, like you said, the libido. Everything moves slow. Hypo, right? Hyper, up and ready to go. I'm nervous. I'm anxious. I'm irritable. I want to eat. My heart is moving fast. Things are moving fast. Because of that, you may have changes in your menstruation because now you're going. And imagine sometimes when you're extra stressed, extra running in life, you may miss a menstruation cycle or two, right? Your hair starts thinning, nails get brittle. I'm shaky. I have muscle weakness because I'm just overextended, right? I have problems sleeping. I'm staying up. Bowel movements are going the opposite of the constipation, right? And a lot of times, I think Dr. Graham alluded to this, when I'm in that space, I may have also some swelling of my neck because I have things attacking my thyroid, and I have this. And when you attack the tissue, all that TSH comes out, and you're reared up and ready to go. So hyperthyroid makes you hyper a lot of times, you know. And Dr. Grimm, I don't know if you want to tag on at the end how you can get hyper and then burn out and get hypo with autoimmune, you know. But when I'm hyper, it's going up, it's out of control. I have the runs, thin skin, I'm nervous, anxious, hypo, things are slow. And so that's hyper. That's how I remember hyper and hypo. I hope Mr. Harrington, I described some of those things. And those are two things that keep going on. You know, we haven't gotten all the way into goiter, and we haven't gotten into the cancers yet. It's hyper and hypo.
So Nellie Purnell King says, good evening to everyone. Linda Potts is here. And Linda says, hello. Ina Mayfield is here. Hey, Ina, how are you? Martha is here, and she says, good evening to everyone. Mimi Boybray says, this is for Dr. Mason. Why is it so hard to get an appointment with a neurologist to get a diagnosis? Okay, we'll come right back to that for him in 1 second. Kim Alexander Jackson is here, and she says, good evening to everyone. And she also says, great information. Well, our team over at the Core Center are watching, and they are saying this is great information just as well. We also have an anonymous question that says, can being a person who suffers with a diagnosis of having a thyroid problem cause miscarriages? So Dr. Mason, if you can grab your question, and then we'll go to that anonymous question. When she asked about why is it so hard to get an appointment with a neurologist? Now remember, Dr. Mason is a urologist with a U. And neurologist is the brain doctor with an N. So just want to straighten that out for you, Mimi, in case my retainer was moving when I introduced them.
Thank you, Nikki, because that was the first thing I was going to do, is make sure, first of all, I'm not a neurologist, and I didn't ever have any neurologists in the office I worked with. They were all other urologists. So most of the times, many specialists can be very booked, especially in this time. And oftentimes based on your insurance in terms of the way you have to go through procuring an appointment, many times having to go through a primary care doctor, which is appropriate, may take additional time. The other thing is that the specialists nowadays, all my friends that are specialists are talking about the tremendous volumes that they have that are being sent to them. So I think a lot of it is supply and demand. And some of it may be the fact that in your particular area or in your particular health plan, maybe they don't have enough. And that may be a problem. And I'll defer to my internal medicine colleagues because they would be the ones who would be making those kinds of references and may have more detail about what some of the delays may be. And it also depends on the system that they're in.
Yeah. I want to piggyback, and then maybe somebody else can pick up on what I'm going to say. One of the things that I've learned, particularly working in hospitals and 2 academic medical centers, is that there are a lot of doctors in hospitals, but there are not a lot of specialty care physicians in hospitals. And that's where you run into a problem. I looked at the numbers, and there are over 1 million physicians in the United States, more than 1 million physicians in the United States. But there are little more than 16,000 neurologists in the United States. That's less than 1.4% of all the physicians in the United States. And you could look at any specialty area, and their numbers will be dwarfed by the number of primary care physicians that we have. So you have a lot of doctors that can tell you you have a problem, something is wrong, and you need to see somebody, and that somebody is a specialist. So they're not enough, and I can't say they're not enough. The reality is there are only so many specialists, and the bulk of them are in academic medical centers. And so it can be very difficult if you need specialty care to get it, and neurology is one of those specialties.
And some of it is also just getting a certain level of interest in that particular specialty. I just sent a text to our teams on the South Side celebrating. We have a new gastroenterology group that's joining our health system, and people screamed cheers through the text because and that's GI, but neurology is even more challenging. Dermatology is challenging. I can go down the list of specialties. So I think the only way to solve this problem, I think, is that the government would have to get involved, because right now, I think it's more if you create supply and demand, that'll ensure that the various specialties retain and maintain a certain income, a certain type of lifestyle. But this is not about lifestyle. This is about making sure people have care. So I bring up the government because I think if the government were to kind of help buffer this and help manage the needs of the country, then we wouldn't have to worry about organizations, some of which I belong to, which are trying to protect the doctors. But we focus on the patients, and we make sure doctors are whole. We make sure they get paid sufficiently for the work they do. But then we don't worry about having too many neurologists because we're concerned about their pay. Like, we have to change our model in this country. And I'm not advocating that we completely flip our capitalistic market or model. I'm just saying that this current model is a setup for failure. It takes 4 to 5 months to see me, and I'm a family doctor. And then we fuss about countries that have universal care, and it takes just as long to see people here. In fact, I can only think of one country that may take longer to see people, and that may be Canada. But all the other countries actually have the wait times are not as bad as advertised. So I just think we need to rethink how we value people and make sure that people have access to these specialists, because there are plenty of people, particularly in the communities that we serve, who would love to become a neurologist. But if they don't have the opportunity to, because they only have this small number of people who are going to be allowed to do this work, it's a setup for failure. And I know it's a little bit of a political statement, but it's very frustrating.
Okay, well, let me go up top here. Barbara Ivory says, I'm watching. She also says that I have fibromyalgia. I have fibromyalgia, and I can't find a specialist in Meridian since my physician relocated to Jackson, Mississippi. Lillian Frazier is here with us, and she says hello to everyone. Mimi Boybray also says, I have a person with mental health. No one wants to help until he sees a neurologist. And Barbara Ivory also says, most of the well-established physicians in my area are leaving because they don't get the pay they deserve from Medicare, Medicaid, and other supplements like United Healthcare and Humana. So while we kind of think about those statements that were thrown out there and those questions, want to make sure that we don't forget our question from our anonymous viewer that says, does having a thyroid problem cause miscarriages?
Yes. Back in the day when I was at West Suburban, I was privileged to deliver probably 700 babies, either as the delivering doctor or the supervising doctor with the residents. We had a beautiful residency program right there on Austin and Erie. Missed that place, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, the thyroid is the thermostat for the body, and it really regulates your metabolism and a lot of bodily functions. So if you, particularly if you have an overactive thyroid, and particularly if you're pregnant, there's an absolute, for sure, increased risk for miscarriages, and it actually can also increase the risk later, and that's early in pregnancy, but later in pregnancy, there's an increased risk for stillbirth. So at the end of the day, if that thermostat is not being regulated well, you'll be at risk. Now, good news is when you think about, I can't remember the exact panel that we used to order, but I'm sure the TSH was on there. So although the TSH is not the perfect test, you'll probably identify those people who are at risk. When you combine that with the symptoms of an overactive thyroid that doctor just shared, it'll allow us to identify people who we should worry about.
I just wanted to
Yeah,
add one other
but
thing
Tom-
to the thing that we were just talking about. I get calls, and I haven't seen a patient. I can't tell you how many years, Tony. I'm happily retired, and I let people know that. But in terms of even the people that I used to be able to refer people to, first of all, a lot of them are retired too.
That's true.
And so that's another problem. And then for the ones too that Dr. Hampton mentioned earlier that are going through training programs, first of all, there's not as many training programs as there used to be. And if they are, they don't take as many people as they used to take. And it takes a while to get through that. And because people know when they get done, the supply and demand is going to help them with salary negotiations and everything else. And the health systems usually are the ones that swoop up some of these people, because nobody now, people need to understand, very few doctors, when I finished, everybody like me finished and we went into practice on our own. That's not the way it works anymore. Many of the, I shouldn't say most, but many of the doctors now are employed physicians. That is, they work for the Humanas or they work for the different, and I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying that is, and there's a lot of reasons why that's the case. And I won't go into those today, but there are a number of reasons that the shortages we have, first of all, they're not the same across the city. There are areas where you can get in to see people earlier, and other areas where you can't. If you live in certain areas that are poor, it's going to be much more difficult to get those kinds of specialists and get in and to see them quickly. So I would say that the best thing you can do is continue to be persistent. And when you know you need to see somebody, and don't be afraid. And maybe my colleagues that are employed docs here on the panel may have some ideas about how to manage that if you're in one of these plans and need to get to see somebody maybe sooner than they tell you can.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to say to Ms. Bray that she is one of our constituents. And if you give our office a call tomorrow, we are working on to try to find you a neurologist still. So you have our number, 773-533-7520. And we're going to really, really assist you with that. Joe, go right ahead, and then I'm going to grab this comment.
Okay. What I wanted to say, again, most of the specialists are in academic medical centers. And we have a lot of academic medical centers in Cook County. There's Loyola, the University of Illinois, University of Chicago, Northwestern, and Rush. Those are 5. They have neurologists. Cook County has neurologists. So if you're looking for a neurologist, you're more likely to find them at an academic medical center or Cook County than any place else. It's not to say that you'll get in to see a neurologist, but if you're looking for a neurologist, you want to look where the neurologists are. They train people to be neurologists. That's where the neurologists usually go, because they're in a position to provide the other support that neurologists need. So if you are looking for a neurologist, you need to go where that you will find, because there are more there than there are any place else. The other thing, and I had a Dr. Maya moment, this is real quick, because Tony brought up the image of a for me, a thermometer, a thermostat, in terms of the thyroid gland. And if your thermostat is not working, and you keep trying to get it to go up and up and up, it ain't gonna go nowhere. It because it ain't working. And that's what they're saying, that the thyroid gland does. It acts like a thermostat and it regulates things. So if it's not working, because it made me think that you could have these extremes of heat and cold, all these things could go on because your thermostat is not working.
Well, I'm laughing again because our audience has some great comments. Great comments. Phyllis says thermostat. Well, it reminds me of menopause. So thank you, Phyllis, of that one. Keisha says, I love when Dr. Tony and Dr. Pete give their analogies. Dr. Pete always makes everything an analogy to sports, i.e., basketball. And Dr. Tony always gives you parts of cars. So I guess that thermostat was important. I have, oh, so I have a great comment from Natalie. Natalie says, Dr. Mason, I know you are glad that you are retired. She said, but I must share. This is not a question, Nikki. This is a statement. Most of our good doctors are retiring. Those are the doctors who could look at you and tell you what was wrong, and you didn't have to have 10,000 tests. They knew what the problem was. They didn't over-medicate you. They gave you the right medication, and you didn't have to go through a bunch of processes to be well and feel better. I want you to be happy in your retirement, but I want you to know you are truly missed, and doctors like you are really missed. It saddens me when I hear that people who have all of the knowledge retire. So, Congressman, I was so glad to hear that it was just a myth that you were retiring. And I'm glad that you are staying and running once again, because this ensures that the 7th Congressional District will get what is needed. So thank you, Natalie, so much for sharing that comment. Thank you so very much. Miss Deborah from Coleman's Barbecue, that's Mr. Coleman's daughter. She says, my daughter suffers from fibromyalgia. Where can I help her find a doctor? Well, we have a number of systems here with us. We have Onyx Healthcare Systems here with us. We also have Advocate here with us. We have UIC. We have a number of them here with us. So, Deborah, if you like, give our office a call tomorrow and we can help you find some systems that can help you with your daughter and her fibromyalgia. Val Talley says, great topic and awesome information. Thank you. Mimi Boybre is also saying thank you. Connie Taylor says, amen. Well, Congressman, I guess that means you can't go anywhere. And Dr. Mason, I think you need to think about coming back. So, that's what Connie is saying. She's saying thank you and amen. Also, Felicia is here and she says, I really miss our Dr. Miller. I don't know where he's at tonight, but he was an awesome physician. And I hope he's coming back. We tend to keep him busy a lot. Donald Dew is trying to get him over at HSI. So very good. Snatch them all back out of retirement, Felicia. Snatch them all back. Barbara Ivory says, my brother's neurologist is also a urologist. He's changing his practice, and now we need a neurologist. He can't practice both. Oh, okay. Nellie Purnell King says, I recently visited the neurologist for a nerve study for my legs. It took months to get that appointment. They poked me all over and told me they were going to get with my doctor. My doctor didn't say a word about the visit. Do you think they are communicating? Well, I would hope they are. But I'll ask you, why don't you go into your mind chart and send them both a note and see if they are communicating with each other? I tend to do that between my doctors a lot. I'll send a note in my chart and see who's reading and who's not. All right, Doug, you look like you got something to say.
Well, I'd like to do this near the end, but I want to tell you that my heart goes out to those patients with fibromyalgia. And for a couple of reasons. One, it is a disease that's kind of controversial. So not everybody sees it the same way and treats it the same way. And all I can do is share my experiences. I often think it's not well applied to Black individuals. Many times, because people can't find the diagnosis, they'll use that term. And I think because of cultural competency issues, other diseases are taking place that are missed. And they may be treated for fibromyalgia and may have other diseases instead. And if those diseases were detected and treated, the outcomes might be better. So if you're seeking treatment for fibromyalgia, I would be looking for a rheumatologist. And you can often find them in your healthcare systems. There'll be listing of them in your hospital staff directories, and your insurance directories may be also able to help you find them. But I'd actually ask them to verify that diagnosis and double check for other diseases, because I think too often, because of cultural competencies, other diagnoses are missed.
Outstanding, outstanding. Nellie says, I checked my chart, didn't see anything but that $1,300 bill. All right, Nellie.
Yeah.
Well, Nellie, you can call my office. You can call our office tomorrow just as well. I'll send a little note myself, just asking them to reach back out to their patient. Can't do anything about that $1,300 bill for you, but we can definitely try to provide some type of advocacy between the two of them so they'll give you a call back. We definitely will. Our core center group, who is working, because they are working, our core center group says, who started that story? The congressman isn't going anywhere. Our building wouldn't be here if it wasn't for him. All right. Nellie Purnell says Blue Cross Blue Shield is paying or has paid. Okay, very, very good. Well, Maya, go right ahead. And you're still muted.
I kept saying I also probably wanted, it is in, but I just want people to think about, when was the last time you had a person in office, a congressperson, that would be available for questions and bring resources to answer about your health virtually every week. And then I've counted 3 different individual situations that were personal to that individual, and 3 times that offices made themselves available to help with separate issues within 24 hours. If you're listening, think back to the last time you had that kind of access and you had that kind of support.
So I got to chime in here because I spent 2 years in this office, and I can tell you it isn't just that, but there are so many constituent issues that are being addressed every day inside this office, whether it be parole issues, student loan issues, family issues. So it's really astonishing to be in this and see how much work is done by so few and dedicated individuals. And it doesn't make the press. It isn't the kind of unusual behavior that gets all the things on Facebook. But let me tell you, this one is really working full time and overtime for his constituents.
Oh, well, Maya, Dr. Maya, if you can, I hope you're vibing me, because Doug brought up something that I really loved. He said that the congressman addresses so many issues, which we do. There are tons of issues that we address. We just donate our Monday evenings to healthcare. Yeah. But he mentioned student loan. Maya, please share.
Oh, yeah. So I will also share. Yeah. I will also share 2 things. I'm not. I don't live in the catchment area, and you all still help me. Because I applied, and what I'm finding out is there are a lot of people in my skin, in my gender, that applied for that student loan forgiveness. I ain't gonna get into it right now, but for some reason, all of us had a similar backstory where I applied and I was told I didn't qualify. Now, anybody knows me, I went to UIC. I trained at the Core Center in Public Health. I did my residency at Jackson, which is a safety net hospital in Miami. I don't do private. Private is good for some people, but my life and my purpose are dedicated in that manner that puts me in public health institutions. Yeah. And I, so that's all I've done. And they still told me I didn't qualify. And the office said, you know what? And I was just talking when we were at an event, and I was like, yeah, I didn't qualify. And they were like, how? Go back and ask again. Advocated for me, and I will share that $211,000 of my student loan were forgiven. And without the office, I never would have even thought to go back and ask, because they just told me, I didn't qualify. And I was just like, Okay, but y'all got a rubric or whatever. I didn't qualify this time, so I hope you all don't mind me sharing that number. I hope you don't. Dr. Graham, you said it doesn't get publicized. It's I've not known the office as long as you have, and I've
Yeah.
not worked in the office, but I'm gathering it's because they don't do it for and so I hope y'all don't mind me disclosing that number. But it happened. It's probably public information anyway. So they don't do it supposed to, and then it don't get posted. But like you said, Dr. Graham, it should. These are the things that, especially in times like this, would give us hope. And I also will say, go back to think, what other person do you know that's doing this? In where I'm from, I want y'all to know y'all got a real one. That's what they say where I'm from. You got a real one.
Yeah.
And just be clear, I just Googled this, so I'm not sure how accurate it is. If you have a $200,000 loan payment, you're looking at a mortgage payment essentially of $2,400 a month. They have income based. So we're talking about living in a country where people who are doing this phenomenal work, like Dr. Maya, having a burden of that. And now you can understand why some doctors are so focused on survival, because just imagine having a payment of a couple of $1,000 a month before you get to your car note, before you get to the mortgage. That's not the kind of country we want to live in. And she's been blessed to have access to the right people at the right time, a little luck, a little blessing, but so many people out there don't have that.
Well, we encourage everyone to apply.
Yes.
I just wanted to say, because the congressman actually has been involved actually in my almost my whole career.
Yes.
And it had not been for him, I would have never got the opportunity to actually spread my wings and go into government. But I just wanted to say this, as I sit on 2 or 3 committees that are involved in the Urban Health Program, that Joe also sits on, that Joe Harrington also sits on that. But in terms of some of the other programs that we have where we're trying to identify, like CPAS, Creating Pathways for Academic Student Success, a state-funded program that I work with Eric Whitaker and a bunch of other people on. And I say all this to say that we're also trying to find students, because we grew up and came through. Yes, we wanted to do well, but we also wanted to do service. And that makes a difference. And nowadays, because the cost of everything is so expensive, you have to think about what you're going to do. And it sometimes even may color the kind of specialty you decide to do or not do. And these are just the realities, and we could talk about this on another show. But I think that it's really kind of a shame. And I'm grateful that the University of Illinois had reasonable tuition when I went there. But the other part is that we have got to create an environment where it looks almost now like the schools are going to be the places for the privileged. And certainly treatment is going to be places for the privileged. And unfortunately, a lot of what we used to do in terms of, and the congressman's done miraculous work in putting through federally qualified health centers and things of that nature. But even FQHCs still need specialty referral. And working in those FQHCs, I'm not sure, I can't speak from firsthand knowledge, but I've had a number of people on my radio show that have been in the federally qualified health centers, and it's difficult to get specialty care, not because they don't want to offer it, but people come out, as Dr. said, about the tremendous burden, financial burden. It's real. It's really real. And when you start trying to have a family, if I tried to have a family and you want to send your children to school and their grade school tuition is almost more than you pay for college. I mean, these are all of the factors. And if there's anything, we need to take a comprehensive look at what we're doing, because we're creating and helping to reinforce the divisions in this country of the have and have nots. and the have-nots is growing. And the have-nots are not necessarily poor people on welfare. The have-nots are becoming more middle and lower, upper income people. So we need to think about that in terms of how we're going to go forward.
Outstanding. This is going to be our last question of the evening, and then we're going to go around and do our until next Mondays. Lillian Frazier asks, when you have a cycle that is off, can this also be caused by a thyroid issue? My daughter has multiple cycles issues to the point of passing out.
Yes. But yeah, I mean, again, if the thermostat for the body is off, it's going to disrupt the hormones, and the hormones will disrupt how the uterus is functioning. Now, it's tricky to try to fix this just with focusing on the thyroid. So if you have an overactive thyroid, you're going to have issues with your cycle potentially. If you have an underactive, you can potentially have issues, but it's really just due to inflammation and poor metabolic health. So what I would recommend, in fact, I'll share in the comments one of a really good YouTuber, conscious gynecologist. I would actually go to that channel and I would listen to videos. I'm sure she has a video that addresses irregular cycles. And then I would follow the model of how do you then achieve the sufficient metabolic health? Because if you have inflammation in the uterus from any cause, you're going to have irregular bleeding. You're going to increase your risk for fibroids. You're going to increase risk for cancer. So there is no pill that'll fix that by itself. You have to, what's the cause of the inflammation? You start there, you treat, because we need to deal with the symptoms today. And that may mean you treat the thyroid. That may mean you take anti-inflammatory, non-steroidal, and things of that nature. You may even need hormones, but to solve the problem, why is the young lady inflamed? And most of that is nutrition. Most of that is stress. Most of that is lack of sleep. Most of that is being in an environment where she can't thrive. So it's going to be a ton of things to consider. But I think if we start with understanding why, I think she'll do better. So check that out and you won't be disappointed.
Outstanding. One of our physicians from one of our local hospitals inside of Chicago actually shared they found my thyroid disorder with irregular heartbeats. So she just wanted to share that if someone is having that just as well, that's another reason to maybe see your doctor. Just want to remind everyone, some years back, right before COVID, when we're right in the middle of COVID, when we started this show, we wanted to remind everyone not to use your emergency room as your primary care physician. Early detection saves lives. So we just want to really remind you guys of that. Early detection saves lives. Well, Audrey Jaycock says, that's my congressman. He's the best. Barbara Ivory says that Tracy Clark Washington, I guess she was trying to make sure that Tracy gets in. Mimi Boybre says, thank you, Congressman Davis. You have been helping me since I was 14 years old. And Nikki, I love you guys both, and you are greatly appreciated by the Irving and Boybre household. Thank you so much, Miss Mimi. Barbara Ivory says, doctors, thank you for all your valuable information. And Lillian Frazier thanks Dr. Hampton for the resource that he shared with her and the information that he shared for her to watch. Just want to make one little quick announcement to everyone here, and I want to thank our community partners that will be joining us, which is the Cook County Physicians Association, the Chicago Medical Society, also Loretta Hospital. 2 additional safety net hospitals will be joining us just as well, and the Westside Health Collaborative. Congressman Davis invites you to share on our National Wear Red Day. Well, February is Wear Red, Heart Healthy Month. So we're going to kick the month off for you. Free and open to the public. We want you to join us on Friday, February 2nd That's Friday, February 2nd, this Friday at 3:30 p.m. at the Columbus Park Reflectory, which is located at 5701 West Jackson. This event, well, what is it? It is a rally and a photo shoot. We want everybody to dress in red. Men can come out and support just as well, but come dressed in red, and we're just going to take photos of women in red for Heart Healthy Month. We're taking a stand against heart disease, and we're standing together. So we want you guys to come and join us there. Bring your red outfits, wear your red outfits. Men, support your wives, girlfriends, sisters. Wear something red, put on that t-shirt, bring your family and take a photo. We will have a photographer there that will be taking your photo in front of a step and repeat. So you can have a family photo in your red. You can also schedule appointments for heart health with one of our community partners. UIC will be there. Loretta Hospital will be there. And we have 2 more community partners that will be there near North. So you want to come and schedule your appointment, do your heart health, and we will also have a brief discussion on preventions of heart disease. So remember, you can call our office at 773-533-7520 if you have any questions. So join us. And James Kelly says, I follow Dr. Tony on YouTube all the time. So thank you, James Kelly. Well, I'm going to start with Joe Harrington. Joe Harrington, you're until next Monday.
Well, I'm going to take up a little more time than I usually do. First, to really say that I've probably known Congressman Davis longer than anybody.
Okay.
I met Congressman Davis in 1975.
He was born in 77.
Well, you didn't know him then. I was working on the west side. I was working on the west side of Chicago at St. Francis Cabrini School, and his secretary was the wife of my best friend, one of my best friends, and she told me to come over and meet her boss, Danny Davis, who was working on Ogden Avenue in a little bitty office. So that's when I first met Dan. So for everybody else, he's a congressman. For me, he's a friend and a colleague. But I do respect him as a congressman. So for next Monday, and I'm going back to this whole idea of a thermostat. And I looked up the definition of thermostat, and they describe it as a device that automatically regulates temperature or that activates a device when the temperature reaches a certain point. So my until next Monday is to recommend to everybody that they become their own thermostat and regulate themselves and do what they're supposed to do. Be your own thermostat. Make sure when things are not going right, you make the adjustment, you move forward, you do those things.
Outstanding, and thank you so much. So be your own thermostat. All right, Dr. Mason, you're until next Monday.
Well, until next Monday, I'm going to be praying for continued health and strength. So I'll be here next Monday. But the other thing is, we've got to help our children. One of the things that we're seeing with the CPAS program, which is a state-funded program for high school students and what have you, but the preparation in some of our schools, the children are not getting the proper mathematics. They're not getting a number of things, and we're having those conversations. Chicago Public Schools has some real challenges, and we've got to really look at where the people are going to come from and be able to do what they need to do. And we have to look at what's happening with who's getting into the medical schools these days. And when I was at county, and that's a whole nother conversation, and I'll have that with you, Congressman Davis. But when I look at who's getting in, not only just to the medical schools, but who's getting into the residencies, who's getting into the specialty fellowships, who are those people, where are they from, and where are they likely to go when they're done? And this is a whole nother conversation. I won't have it right now. Many of you know what I'm talking about already, but it is creating a big problem. And when I had to, when I was at county, when there was all these people trying to come through that needed visas, and I'm like, well, we got people that are here that don't need any visas to come to be a part of the plan. So we need to look at those two things too, Congressman. And it's not going to be comfortable, but it is necessary.
Outstanding, and thank you. Doug, you're until next Monday.
Well, I just want to echo and support Dr. Mason. I mean, my youngest daughter worked in one of the charter schools for Chicago, and it's absolutely true what he's saying that these kids are not getting sufficient education. She had kids who were sophomores in high school who could not read and write and couldn't do simple math. How can you possibly enter this world? How can you balance a checkbook? How can you write a check? How can you read a contract? How can you buy a home if you don't have these basic skills? And then how can you get a job that provides meaningful work so that you can take care of yourself and your family? So I think Dr. Mason is absolutely spot on. He's also spot on in the second part of this conversation too, that there have been very substantial changes in who's gotten into medical school in the last 2 decades, and it isn't working out as well as it could have. And I think that there are ways of addressing this, especially in the way that we fund medical residencies, that could begin to address the distribution of physicians and the composition of medical school classes. And I want to support him 100%.
Outstanding. Well, Dr. Hampton, you're until next Monday.
I just want to echo the idea that, first of all, be responsible to a certain extent for your own success, like Joseph suggested. But we do want to throw some prayers in the air because we are at a crossroads of sorts. Because as Congressman has suggested, we have some decisions to make. So I want to pray for all of those leaders who are in a position of power, that they're empathetic to the babies that would have to go into a war, and they do everything within their power to make that the last option. And I want them to focus on the families more than those other influences that may impact the decision. So I'm just kind of throwing out a prayer that I ask you guys do the same. This is, it's kind of shocking that in 2024 that this is how we resolve issues. You'd think that was something you read in a book. And it was, oh, those barbaric people from the old days, they do crazy stuff. We don't do that. We sit at the table and we talk. So I'm always perplexed that intellectually competent people have to resolve issues this way. So until that changes, let's put some faith in the air. And that's what I want. If the more of us who do that, the better we'll be. So that'll be my until next Monday.
All right, on your until next Monday, because where 2 or 3 are gathered in his name, what? He will be in the midst. He also let us know that when prayer and praises go up, blessings come down. So I am always the one who says there is nothing wrong with prayer, and prayer changes things. Well, Maya, you're until next Monday.
Well, until next Monday, I'm still loving Dr. Hampton's thermostat and Dr. Harrington's thermostat. The thyroid being the thermostat, but also looking at the thermostat of peace in your mind with what's going on right now. Leaning into that, when we first got on, Mr. Harrington said, hey, you got to find somewhere. If it gets too hot, you got to find somewhere where you can step back, turn down, breathe. And I do think, that leads us into something we may want to think about adding, to our conversation dossier, which is what should we do as a community? Just historic point of fact, when things turn up around the globe, also we're still tailing out of COVID, the violence increases. Because people a lot of times break, mentally they just feel at end, Mm-hmm. So how do we turn that thermostat down? We might want to start getting into that and getting into, it's always a good time to protect the tribe, mm-hmm. and how we protect the tribe in this situation. Until next Monday.
All right. Thank you so very much. Well, Joe, you started something. And what do I mean by that? I have tons of comments coming in via text, via private messages and on our public message line that I cannot keep up with people being in competition of who knew the congressman first. That's all because of Joe Harrington. If it isn't that lane tech conversation, now it's who knew him first. So I'm only going to read one of these comments because the other comments is just crazy. I'm going to share them with the congressman when he gets home. But Lillian says, I go back to 2 East 8th Street with the congressman. He's been working hard and long. So, Joe, you have started something here. Well, Congressman, as always, take us home.
Well, you know, Miss B.D. King taught me when I was a little boy. She had a saying that she would sometimes use when she wanted us to be quiet and just listen. And she would say that a wise old owl sat on an oak. The more he heard, the less he spoke. The less he spoke, the more he heard. And then she'd say, I want you boys to be like that wise old bird. And if you don't, of course, she had a way to encourage us. You know, some call the licking stick. So I learned to listen. I mean, and so if you will note, I really didn't get very engaged in the discussion because I was so enthralled listening to all of the profound knowledge and wisdom that was coming to us. And just as important for me was listening to people. And I go by Coleman's barbecue every once in a while and cheat a little bit. And, I just have a need for some rib tips. Well, it just happened that Mr. Henry Coleman and my sister graduated from high school together. And they always have high school reunions, and they would always go back to Dermot, Arkansas, and, have a little fun. I was at a church Sunday, and there was a fellow there who was the pastor, who also had grown up in Chico County, Arkansas. And as I listened to people who express Audrey Jaycock, when I met her, she was a trustee in the village of Maywood. The fellow that Joe Harrington was talking about is one of the main reasons that we have a system in Illinois of electing sub-circuit judges. I mean, the reason that we have, of course, it has generated thousands now, several thousand African Americans who have gone to and through the circuit courts of the state, but especially in Cook County, where since the initiation of that, more Black people and women and other minorities have been elected to judgeships than you can count. And that's because Anthony understood that in a county that's got over 5 million people in it, and if an individual had to try to run for something countywide that they probably never would make it. Because how do you get 5 million people to know that you exist? And so just hearing from these kind of people and knowing them. Now, in 1975, I also visited the Jomo Kenyatta Hospital in Nairobi, Kenya. It was my first trip to Africa, and I was on a study trip, and the Jomo Kenyatta Hospital was also one of the places that we went as we were studying public health and as we were looking at health. And people were on that trip with me, like Dr. Bobby Wright's wife named the mental health center after. And of course, Bobby became one of the world's most renowned psychiatrists in the minds of many of us, psychologists, clinical psychologists. So I want to thank everybody for the wisdom that you have imparted. And I certainly agree that we are a Christian nation, at least we profess to be. Matter of fact, we have our national prayer breakfast on Thursday morning. And there are thousands of people who will come into Washington, D.C. from all over the country, and they will express their hopes for the country. And people will leave energized and they will leave with the level of hope that we can continue be in pursuit of all those things that have been elusive, things that we know should be happening and that we know should be taking place. And I couldn't help but laugh and kind of smile to myself, remembering some of this because one of my opponents are telling people that I have Alzheimer's. And I was joking to my sister the other day. And I said, you know, I remember when we learned how to read and we was about 5 or 6 years old. And my father would be teaching us how to read in a joking kind of way. And he'd say, all right, little boy, spell cat, C-A-T. He said, very good. Now spell little cat, you know. And if you knew kitten, K-I-T, I said, you know, I was about 5 years old when we were doing that. And I still remember it. And so I just kind of thank the good Lord that my memory is in good shape. Thanks to all of you for reigniting. And of course, Jill was in a moment ago, and that's the person who helped Dr. Maya get that $211,000 write off on her. Then we had another person call me. They got 230,000. They got a 230,000. So all of those individuals who suggest from a political vantage point that the Biden administration isn't doing anything. And I read something saying that the African Americans, there were many who were tiring of Biden. And I was saying that is so unfortunate when you look at the alternatives from a realistic political vantage point. And this is not a political discussion, but my definition tells me that anytime two people interact, that some politicking takes place. Unless they agree on everything that goes on. And if they do, then it means that one of them is very unnecessary. And so I define politics as being everything that you think of, that you hope for, that you are trying to accomplish. And when you define it that way, then everything you do, everything you think, everything you feel, everything you hope becomes a part of the politicization of our being. So thank you all. And just like Jill's been trying to make sure that I stay awake because I only got up at 5:30. You know, you have to come to these places. So I'm about ready to hit the hay in DC. Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful, wonderful evening. It's been a great discussion. Could not have been better. Take care.
Good night.
Good night.
Oh, I'm sleepy.